gamble every day. Love the gamble.
Not a spin. How much? It's just spin.
It's just fun. I just like it. It adds extra bit of oomph into the game. You know, you want to watch it more.
You're watching the game and there's something you get out of the game.
There's more to stake in the game.
Obviously my dad was gambling and I just followed on from my dad and probably lost my life quite a few times, money-wise.
I've bet more than I should do in the past, but I've also learned to control my gambling when I need to. So.
Look, it's okay to have a flutter, you know, 10 or 20 quid on the football, as long as you don't go chasing. That's where the problem comes, when people go chasing. So you're chasing your losses and you obviously end up losing more, you lose more, you're chasing again. I've been there, chased, borrowed money off people left, right and centre to do that, and it just doesn't work,
It seems as though gambling is everywhere. It's glorified in films, TV, video games, advertisements. There are nearly twice as many bookmakers as there are libraries in the UK, and over half of Premier League football teams have a betting sponsor on their shirt. Plus, these ads are hard to avoid.
And we gamble responsibly.
That's not quite true, is it? Unsafe and irresponsible gambling is on the rise in the UK. According to the Gambling Commission, 2.5% of Scottish people are classed as problem gamblers. That's where their betting interferes with their personal life, their spending habits, and their own mental health. But in that stat, there's one group of society that are more at risk than anyone else: young men.
According to GamStop, young men are twice as more likely to have a bet on than their female counterparts, but they're also 4 times more likely to develop a gambling problem. According to a Times study, some young men are spending as much on their weekly food shop as they are on their gambling habit.
So when do the stakes get so high for young men? And how did this youth gambling problem get so out of control?
Turning 18, I was most excited to gamble and bet. Like, I wasn't really fussed about being able to go out like drinking or going into town or whatever. Like, my pure focus was like, right, I can now like legally gamble. Like, let's get this show on the road, sort of thing.
A Freedom of Information request we sent to the NHS shows that referrals for gambling addiction have risen year on year between 2020 and 2024. We've come to North London to meet Dr. Sarah Coleman, a psychologist who treats patients who have been referred for help with their gambling. Dr. Sarah has also worked at the National Gambling Clinic to look into why gambling has become a predominantly male issue.
When we think about the male brain, it hasn't fully developed until their mid-20s, and so young men are going to be more susceptible to that sort of advertising. And it may be that with young men as well, there's a sensation-seeking part of their brain that they are looking for, more impulsivity, particularly if they are lacking in self-esteem perhaps, or there are some other comorbid psychological difficulties, maybe, sort of they've suffered trauma or they're just more vulnerable, then they are going to be more susceptible to those sort of adverts.
For Lewis, Dr. Sarah's theories sound all too familiar.
Hey Lewis, how are you doing?
After winning $64,000 on his first ever bet when he was 16, he continued to chase the big win, but was never as lucky.
Over the course of being 18, I then went to university in the September, and it became a coping mechanism for me to deal with the homesickness and a bit of the stress that I was experiencing. And like sometimes if I wasn't having a great night or felt like I hadn't made any friends, I was panicking and then would recluse myself back into my room and be gambling away. And there was one point where I had my maintenance loan come in, the first ever payment to kind of cover off, general getting through university for that quarter or term. And I had basically blown through that in a matter of minutes. So it got to a point where I was still feeling homesick. I still wasn't sure about the course, and then I'd also blown through a loan.
When his gambling spiraled out of control, you'd think his bookmaker would limit his accounts. Instead, they made him a VIP customer.
One of the big betting companies in the UK basically reached out via my email I'd registered with to say we'd love to invite you to the ATP World Tour Finals for being a valued customer.
Back in North London, Dr. Sarah worries that this is a problem which is only going to get worse.
with the difficulties in society, there's a lot of maybe young men who are growing up perhaps without a father, and so they're turning to social media to try and understand what it means to be a man, and people like Andrew Tate are perhaps cashing in on that opportunity, and possibly they are tapping into maybe vulnerable young men who are searching for that, and they are therefore believing what they hear from him, and therefore their take is, okay, well, I need to get rich quick and then my life will be great. And because they're vulnerable as already, and we were talking about those multiple factors, then it might mean that as a result, they're going to be more susceptible to falling into that category of problem gambling rather than the social, the recreational sort of gamblers that we talked about earlier.
Few months of being 18, my gambling was responsible. It was that classic sort of like £5 football accumulator on the weekend, trying to win like 10 grand or something, just like that like bit of fun. But yeah, very, 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 very quickly, it was no longer that. I was like depositing pretty much all of my wages as soon as I would get paid. I was gambling on all different types of sports, casino games, and I was betting on like teams. I couldn't even tell you what kit they played in. I couldn't tell you what country they were from. I had no idea of any players, but if I could bet on them, I was betting on them.
We're escaping London to meet a man who has dedicated most of his working life to gambling prevention, helping young men like Lewis. After his own struggles, Aaron Aggott spends his time delivering classes in colleges and elite sports teams
every morning,
trying to break the stigma.
I think it's important to share my experiences because they were particularly negative. As a gambling addict from the ages of 18 to 29, I don't have many particular fond memories throughout that time. And I think it's important that we try and offer more preventative measures to the next generation.
With exposure to gambling on the rise, Aaron's worried that we're storing problems for the future.
As long as you can remember, there's been gambling logos on the front of football shirts. There's been gambling logos around the ground. You go on social media and you've got no choice but to see a gambling advert. So what that's done is that's created a normalisation of a product that's actually an 18-plus product. If you think about cigarettes and alcohol used to be advertised before 9 o'clock. Cigarettes then got pushed to after 9, then they got completely abolished. Alcohol used to be before 9, now it's more of a seasonal advertisement, so closer to Christmas you'll see more, but it tends to be later on in the day or evening. But with gambling, it's an 18-plus product, but we seem to be allowed to just advertise it wherever we want. That's using celebrities, it's using endorsements, using sport, social media.
Aaron's classes move away from the conventional addiction therapy techniques and tailors his treatment specifically to young men.
Relatability is key. So my own recovery journey, when I first felt comfortable opening up, was because I was able to relate to someone. So I used a counsellor that was fairly young. He had experience of gambling addiction in the family. And for me then, he understood me on a specific level, which made me feel more comfortable. So when you think about our workshops that we do, number one for us is being able to relate to a younger audience. How do you do that? The content that you deliver, the language that you use. Everything doesn't need to be so formal and professional. As students are coming in, yes bro, respect, in you come. So it's taking that relatability piece and making sure holistically we're doing everything we can to engage everyone that's part of the cohort.
Aaron also works with elite football, cricket and rugby academies, and he thinks gambling among young sportsmen is a growing problem.
So I know academy football players that are losing more money playing Uno on the coach to an away game than they're actually getting in a month. If you do notice that 1 minute gambling was fine, but now it's becoming a problem, then it's very unlikely that you're going to go to the player care team at the club and open up. A couple of reasons. As a young person, you're thinking it's going to affect my chances of getting a contract. It's going to affect my chances of playing. So straight away there is a preconception that where do I go with this information? Because our education workshops build that initial trust, because we're quite honest and the content we deliver on our own story is quite raw and impactful, there is an element of trust with the students that if they've got an issue, they can reach out to us as an independent organisation, either for advice or to utilise our recovery services. So again, I'd go back to that sort of relatability piece. If you can relate and engage that younger demographic and you've built trust with them, you've got a much more stronger chance of them opening up to you and you being able to support them.
What I would say is was when I was sort of like very heavy contemplating like suicide as like the only way out to go. Like I found myself, I was in such a state and such a mess, like financially and mentally, and that I felt like I couldn't get myself out anymore. I really did believe that was the only way to go. If I was to carry out the act, I would be sort of free from it. Yeah, that moment. I remember it now. Like I was sat like in the car, the place I was going to do it. Like it was really late at night. Like I had stuff sort of planned and like notes and that written out for like family members and friends and stuff, and the things I needed to do it. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if I was like scared to do it, like scared if I failed, or if I was scared to be successful in the act. But yeah, I just sort of didn't do it. Went home, slept, and I just got on with life like nothing happened. Like that was it.
We have come to King's College London to meet Dr. Stephen Sharman, who has dedicated his career to the ins and outs of researching gambling addiction. This sort of related to your research, and this is kind of grabbing my interest.
Yes, so this isn't just a prop. The bulk of work we do uses virtual reality to recreate different gambling environments. And actually, what we wanted to add to one of our studies was a kind of a sense of touch as well. So we put a headset on, they go into a casino, they start playing a slot machine, but they also they actually sat on a stool, this stool sat here, and pressed these buttons, kind of coordinated with what was happening in the virtual environment. So it was just to add that kind of tactile sensation to a virtual reality study around gambling.
For Dr. Stephen, the gender gap in betting culture is closing.
So although I think it's fair to say that gambling has historically been a male pastime and males have experienced more harm, that gap's actually closing, and we're seeing much more women engaging in gambling and experiencing harm.
It was a few days later, I told one of my good mates about it. My mate Alex, he's always been like very supportive. He's almost been sort of it sounds weird, like almost like a second father. Like I got obviously my dad, like my birth dad, like my mum and dad, they're very supportive. But like I got one really good mate that I can always go to and speak to about anything. And I told him, and he then told my parents and that. And
unfortunately, Andrew Tate wasn't around for a chat, but Flutter have sent us this comment.
Our Play Well strategy sets out our commitment to safer gambling, and it's a fundamental element of the group's overall strategy. Our regions and brands develop safer gambling programs, which are tailored to their individual markets, ensuring compliance with local regulation while also aligning to our global Play Well principles.
Sticking a bet on has never been easier, but experts think there's also a growing shift towards regulation. The government has ring-fenced £15 million of funding to help with gambling addiction nationally, and an all-party parliamentary group on gambling was founded in 2017. There are now 16 NHS gambling clinics, 15 more than 6 years ago. But it's still uncertain what will change.
What we do know is that gambling addictions can ruin lives, and breaking out of that cycle could save them.
Yeah, I did have those interventions at about 22, 23 years old where I did start really talking about it with family. It was a horrible conversation, but the weight after was off my shoulders for the first time ever. Like my problem had been shared with someone for the first time. It was a relief.
We put like more barriers and restrictions in place and tried to continue living like a gamble-free life, which is what we've managed to do. Obviously, there's been slip-ups along the way, but from that like very moment, we're in a much better place.
My biggest regret is not losing 263 grand. Don't get me wrong, I'd love it back. But my biggest regret is not at 18 years of age saying, Mum, I've got a problem, and thinking I can deal with it myself. Because I would constantly tell myself, do you know what, I'm not going to gamble tomorrow. I'm not going to gamble tomorrow. And tomorrow did come, but it come 12 years later. So it's about making young people understand that if you've got an issue, deal with it.
How happy am I that I've stopped? I'm absolutely buzzing. I've got my life back, in a way. I've got my life back, so it's all positive.
There's a house in New Orleans